You can build an awesome subwoofer box with minimal tools. It all starts right here. This is called a flat pack. You can knock out this entire project with just these tools right here. As I unbox this flat pack, there are a few things that jump out. The first thing is actually very well packaged. I put together a ton of flat packs and oftentimes they show up damaged with ends that have been all bunged up. This one had plenty of styrofoam, so big shout out to Down4Sound for putting a little bit of extra effort into the packaging. Inside the box you will find the instructions. I found the instructions to be lacking. More on that later. This thing is made out of plywood, but this isn't the stuff you get at your local big box home improvement store. You can see here it has multiple layers and a nice birch veneer. Right here is the top piece. It's got a great big Down4Sound logo. Check out this big heavy duty terminal cup. This thing is like $8 on the Down4Sound website, which really is far too cheap for a terminal cup that's this heavy duty. On one side of the enclosure, there is a cutout for the terminal cup. It's been recessed, so it's gonna sit nice and flush. One thing I did notice, there are several pre-drilled screw holes. That's gonna make life a whole lot easier later. After you get it unboxed, you can kind of break up the workflow into two big main stages, the assembly and the finishing. The tools you need to assemble the box are pretty straightforward. You need a drill and or a driver. They tend to come in kits with a drill and a driver with a few bits. A budget-friendly brand like these will work just fine, and I'll be sure to give you a link to them right here in the video if you want to order some of these for yourself. Clamps are not necessary, but they're going to make life a whole lot easier, so pick up some clamps. You'll need some wood glue. Wood glue is what holds everything together. You'll need some screws. I think these are number 6 1.5 inch. A pack of 100 was less than $10. When you're picking out your screw, make sure you get a wood screw. The top needs to be flat, and there should be a little flute on the underside of the screw. You can use any wood glue that you like. Most wood glue is pretty much the same. I like this wood glue right here because it dries clear, and in my experience, it doesn't stain the plywood as bad as Titebond 2 or Titebond 3. One of the really cool things about a box like this, you can assemble it really fast, especially if you have a friend to help out. I'm starting at 2:33 p.m. This is a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, so you want to start by attaching the pieces that are kind of obvious. That's going to be the bottom and the back. What I like to do is lay down some glue and then turn the pieces up on their side. That way you can use your flat work surface to make sure everything's lined up properly. If you have clamps, go ahead and use them to hold everything in place, then start screwing.
That's what she said.
I'm totally loving these pre-drilled screw holes. This makes life a whole lot easier. As you can see here, I have a tendency to use way too much glue. You want a little bit of squeeze out, and you don't want to wipe it right now. Wait about 30 minutes for it to firm up a little bit, then come back and scrape it off. After you attach the back, I recommend that you grab the side with the cutout for the terminal cup and attach it next. Pay attention to that recess. You want to make sure it stays on the outside of the box. I ran into a little snag while I was attaching the back to the side. The pre-drilled screw holes kind of line up with each other, and the screw coming up through the bottom of the box interfered with the screw coming in from the back of the box. So I had to grab my drill with the drill bit and drill my own hole so that I could screw it. I said earlier that the instructions were underwhelming. The parts themselves are not labeled, and the part name is just the part number. This project is like trying to solve a puzzle. You've got these 4 pieces here, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and you've got to figure out where they go because the instructions don't really make it clear. The only one that's really obvious is this piece here, which has to be a side because it has the terminal cup in it. So we'll put this one together first before we work on these. Just like trying to put together a puzzle, you have to put things in position to try to figure out what they are. This piece right here now goes from front to back. This is the other side. I'm going to set that aside for now. So I've been able to deduce just by the process of elimination that these 2 pieces right here are the port. And it's not clear which one is which and which one goes where. Does it go like this or does it go like this? Here are the 2 port walls together and one of them is shorter. So I'm thinking the shorter one must be the first port wall. So the front goes here, the shorter piece goes here, the longer piece goes here. That's going to give me a roughly 3 inches of port opening. Yep, that's how it goes together. All that would have been a lot easier to sort out if that first port wall would have had a few screw holes drilled into it. I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill a few screw holes before I attach these 2 pieces together, and then from there I'm going to move on to the side of the box. And of course, I ran into the same screw interference problem on this side that I had on the other side. So once again, I had to drill my own hole.
That's what she said.
Moving on to the front, also known as the baffle, that's the part where the speaker cut out. Just lay down some more glue and put the baffle into position and screw it down. I think I said earlier I'm using 1.5" screws. That caused a little bit of a problem here. At this spot right here, the speaker cutout is really close to the edge of the baffle, and the screws I'm using are going to poke through the speaker cutout. You don't want that. So I dug around and found a few shorter screws. So everything fits as intended. Before you install the port itself, you want to put one of your corner 45s into the corner there at the port, because you won't be able to reach it after you put the port in. If you watch my videos, you know I'm not a big fan of corner 45s, but if you already have them, why not use them? It's not going to hurt anything. What I usually do is tack these in with a brad nail, but kind of the point of the video is to show you that you can use a flat pack to build your own box without a lot of tools, so I can't really grab my brad nailer and do that. You could screw these in, or you could hold them in with a clamp until the glue sets up. But I've got a hack for you. At 60 degrees Fahrenheit, wood glue will hold in about 30 minutes and then fully cure in about 24 hours. So on a cool day, you could just clamp these in place and go get a sandwich. But it was 88 degrees when I filmed this. And at that temperature, you can just slather on some glue and hold it in place for a few minutes. Moving on to the port, make sure you glue up all of the surfaces before you screw the port to the baffle. Now you reach a point where you've got to make a decision. You've got to find a way to affix the port to the rest of the enclosure. Now you could flip it over and drive in some screws, but there aren't any pre-drilled screw holes on the underneath. And as I'm inspecting my work, I've noticed that there's plenty of glue squeeze out where the port comes into contact with the bottom of the box. So I don't think I'm going to need to. Later on, when I install the top, it's going to put down plenty of clamping pressure, so I can just skip that step. If you haven't installed the rest of the 45s, now's a good time to do that. Then it's just a matter of gluing and screwing the top.
That's what she said.
All right, that's stage one. That is the assembly process. That took 1 hour and 55 minutes, but that also included the time spent setting up these 3 cameras that I used to film the process. There's no reason why you couldn't build this box in 1 hour, and if you had a friend helping you out, you could probably knock it out in 30 minutes. Now, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and wire up and install a subwoofer. In another 30 minutes, you could be dropping the bass. But you really should put a finish on the enclosure, and that is the second part of the video. Step 1 is to sand the enclosure. Now, you might have a power sander of some type, and if you do, I'm going to advise that you actually don't use it. This birch veneer can be very thin, and you will surprise yourself by how fast you can sand through it. So keeping with the theme of building a box with hardly any tools, just grab some sandpaper and start sanding. If you think you need a tool for this, you can grab one of these sanding blocks right here. Start off with a large grit sandpaper, that's a small number, and then work your way up to larger numbers, which is a finer grit. I did 2 steps. 120 followed by 220. The difference a little sandpaper makes is astonishing. The box already looks and feels better. The easiest thing to do next is to grab something like this right here. It dries in about 30 minutes, and in between coats, you sand it with some really fine-grained steel wool. You don't want to use sandpaper on it. So if you're just trying to get this thing together as quick as possible so you can enjoy your music, grab some of this. You'll be ready to install the sub in your car the next day. As for me, I'm going to stain the box. The main reason is because I'm not good at staining and I'm trying to get better at it. One thing I have figured out, some pre-stain conditioner definitely helps, so I'm going to wipe some of that on. And while I'm doing that, here's a money-saving tip. Only buy the larger cans of stain and poly and conditioner if you plan on cranking out a whole lot of woodworking projects or you're just going to build a ton of subwoofer boxes. I found that the larger cans tend to dry out and go bad before I get a chance to use most of it. This stain here is supposed to be a dark blue. You can brush it on or wipe it on. I'm wiping it on with a rag. Next time I'm going to use a brush. I'm not happy with the way this turned out. It's not consistent. I've got blotchiness and streaks in it where I put too much stain in some places and not enough in others. When you finish staining, it's really good idea to go ahead and put some kind of sealant on it. For that, I'm going to try some oil-based poly. The big downside for the oil-based poly is it has to dry a day between coats. So this is a really time-consuming process. I recommend that you water it down with some mineral spirits before you apply it. If you want a really durable finish, apply multiple coats. And while I'm doing that, let me take a minute to say thank you to all of my patrons, with a big shout out to $25 and up patrons: Joaquin, JD America, God King Toro, Timothy Bow, and Jonathan. After you're done with the stain and the poly and it's all had days to dry, you can install the terminal cup. I recommend that you crimp on some ring terminals, and for that, you're going to have to disassemble the bolts and put it all back together. And that was a little bit of a tedious process. I usually use a much lower quality terminal cup with push disconnects. Those are easier to work with, but this one, you'll have less resistance through those bolts. Before I do any testing, I want to share with you my opinion of the box itself and the assembly process. And here's an important point. Local to me, birch plywood is about 80 bucks for a full sheet, and it's not the good stuff. It is pine plywood with a birch veneer. This kind of plywood is hard to find here locally, and when I do find it, it's really expensive. And of course, this terminal cup is $8 on the Down for Sound website. And looking at the material cost, I don't think I could buy the material that's in this flat pack for less than the price of the flat pack. So this thing is an absolute bargain. The best part of the flat pack, there's no cutting. You don't need any saws of any type. Everything's pre-cut and ready to go. Everything fit together nicely. Tolerances were tight. I like that. Things I would change, I would have liked to have seen some pre-drilled screw holes in the bottom of the box, and of course some pre-drilled screw holes in that first port wall. The box itself is very large. It's about 3.5 cubic feet, and that is a good thing. Most prefab boxes are tragically undersized. It's also tuned really low. The official specs online say 32 Hertz. This thing is designed for a really big, heavy-duty, powerful subwoofer. And because of that, I would have made it a 4-inch port instead of a 3-inch port, but this 3-inch port should work just fine. The terminal cup with those big bolts is complete overkill. This flat pack, it is designed for someone who wants to run a monster subwoofer. A little bit of bracing to help with panel resonance would have been nice, but that means more wood and more weight and increased shipping costs, so there's always some kind of a trade-off. If you don't have a good way to cut your own wood, a flat pack like this is exactly what you're looking for. As far as testing out the box, I got something really cool planned for that, so hit this subscribe button right up here and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. I'm Justin, this is the DIY Audio Guy YouTube channel, and I will see you on the next adventure.